I'm Giselle, 29, and my mother just hung up after telling me I need to sell my penthouse apartment to bail out my sister. 3 years of radio silence, and that's how she chose to reconnect. Not with an apology, not even a simple, "How are you?" but with a demand for $39,000. Because apparently, family means I'm the family ATM, and my success exists solely to fix everyone else's problems. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt like the family disappointment. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me take you back to where this mess really started. I was 7 years old when my parents brought home baby Connor, and suddenly I became the live-in babysitter. Not the big sister, the help. While other kids played after school, I was changing diapers and warming bottles. Giselle's so responsible, my mother would tell her friends. Such a little helper. Helper. That word still makes my skin crawl. 2 years later came Madison, and my unpaid internship as a childcare provider became a full-time job. I'd walk home from school, grab the kids from daycare, feed them dinner, and help with homework while my parents worked late or attended Connor's soccer practice. Because Connor needed extra attention. Connor was special. Connor had potential. My 10th birthday arrived on a Tuesday. I waited all day for someone to remember, watching as my parents hurried around preparing for Connor's parent-teacher conference. Finally, at dinner, I mentioned it was my birthday. "Oh, sweetie," Mom said, barely looking up from cutting Madison's chicken. "We'll celebrate this weekend. Connor's tournament is more important right now." That weekend never came. There was always something more pressing, more important, more urgent than celebrating the daughter who kept their household running. But you know what's funny? And I use that term loosely. They never missed Connor's birthday. Or Madison's. Those were events. Parties with themes and decorations and friends and cake from the expensive bakery downtown. By the time I turned 12, I'd stopped expecting birthday celebrations. I'd learned that being the responsible one meant being invisible until someone needed something. Need someone to watch the kids while you go to Madison's dance recital? Call Giselle. Need someone to clean up after Connor's sleepover? Giselle's got it handled. Need someone to sacrifice their weekend plans because the babysitter canceled? Good thing Giselle never has plans anyway. High school was when the pattern really cemented itself. While Connor got new cleats every season and Madison got whatever art supplies her heart desired, I worked part-time at our neighbor's restaurant to save money for college. Because somehow, despite being the oldest and supposedly the most responsible, I was the only one expected to fund my own future. "You're so mature for your age," my mother would say whenever I questioned why I was working while my siblings played. "You understand that money doesn't grow on trees." Apparently, money did grow on trees, just not trees that benefited me. Senior year brought the crushing realization that despite maintaining a 4.0 GPA and working 20 hours a week, I'd saved exactly $3,000 for college. Connor's travel baseball expenses had somehow become my responsibility when my parents' budget got tight. Just this once had turned into every tournament, every training camp, every piece of equipment. That's when I made my first real decision as an adult. I was done. The day I announced I'd received a full scholarship to Columbia was the day I learned what conditional love really looked like. You'd think parents would be proud, right? Their daughter, the one who'd been raising their other children since she could barely tie her own shoes, had earned a full ride to an Ivy League school. My mother's response? Well, that's convenient. Now Connor can use your college fund for his elite baseball program. "I'm sorry, what college fund?" I'd asked, genuinely confused. "The $3,000 you've been saving became Connor's by family decree, because I no longer needed it, because I'd found another way, because somehow my hard work and sacrifice made me less deserving of family investment, not more." The summer before college was a masterclass in invisible labor. While Connor attended expensive baseball camps and Madison got her bedroom redecorated, I worked double shifts at the restaurant, watched the kids, and somehow found time to prepare for the most challenging academic experience of my life. My parents attended Connor's summer league games religiously. They documented Madison's art camp projects like she was the next Picasso. My scholarship ceremony? They had a softball game and a dance recital. More important priorities, as always. Moving to New York felt like stepping into actual sunlight after living in a cave. For the first time in my memory, I was surrounded by people who saw me as more than free labor. My roommate Sarah actually thanked me when I helped her move furniture. My study group appreciated my organizational skills without expecting me to solve all their problems. College was where I discovered what I was capable of when I wasn't constantly managing other people's chaos. My professors noticed my work ethic. My internship supervisors recommended me for competitive programs. People saw potential in me, not just my utility as an unpaid assistant. I called home once a week that first semester, dutifully checking in like the good daughter I'd been trained to be. The conversations followed a predictable pattern. How was Connor's season going? Madison needed help with a school project. Could I talk to her over video chat and basically do it for her? Dad's work was stressful, Mom was overwhelmed, everyone was so busy. And how was my experience at one of the most prestigious universities in the country? That's nice, dear. Can you hold on? Connor's coach is calling. By sophomore year, I was calling home every other week. By junior year, once a month. Not out of rebellion or anger, but because I was building a life where I mattered, where my achievements were celebrated, where my presence was wanted rather than required, where I existed as a person rather than a function. The distance gave me clarity I'd never had before. I could see the patterns, the manipulation, the way my family had convinced me that love meant sacrifice while they sacrificed nothing. I was the daughter who gave up her childhood to raise their children, who worked to fund her brother's dreams, who disappeared so they could focus on the kids they actually wanted to parent. My senior year, I landed an internship at a prestigious marketing firm in Manhattan, not because of family connections or financial support, but because I'd built a portfolio of work that impressed people who didn't share my DNA. My supervisor, Janet, became my first real mentor, someone who invested in my success without expecting me to manage her personal life in return. The internship led to a job offer, full benefits, competitive salary, opportunity for growth. In New York City, surrounded by people who valued my contributions and respected my boundaries. It was everything I'd worked toward, and it was mine. When I called to share the news, Connor was in the middle of a recruiting visit. Madison had made the honor roll. My parents were planning a celebration dinner for her academic achievement, something they'd never done for my straight A's. "That's great, sweetie," Mom said absently. "Can you call back later? We're just heading out to dinner for Madison." I hung up and realized I'd been holding my breath, not from disappointment but from relief. Because for the first time, I understood that their indifference wasn't about me, it was about them. Graduation day arrived with typical family fanfare. For Connor's middle school promotion ceremony, my Ivy League diploma apparently ranked lower than Connor's transition to 8th grade, because that's where my parents chose to be. I sat in Columbia's graduation ceremony surrounded by families who'd traveled across the country to celebrate their children's achievements. Sarah's parents had flown in from Oregon and treated me like an honorary daughter, taking pictures and asking about my post-graduation plans with genuine interest. For a few hours, I experienced what it felt like to have people proud of you without expecting anything in return. My phone buzzed once during the ceremony. A text from Mom. "Sorry we couldn't make it. Connor's ceremony ran long. Congratulations." No phone call, no request for pictures, no acknowledgement that their oldest daughter had just accomplished something they'd never even dreamed of achieving themselves. The job market in Manhattan was brutal, but I'd prepared for that reality. While my college friends moved back home to figure out their next steps, I stayed in New York with $2,000 in savings, a sublet apartment in Queens, and the kind of determination that only comes from having no safety net. Those first 6 months tested every survival skill I'd developed growing up. I lived on ramen noodles and discounted groceries, took the subway everywhere, and worked unpaid overtime to prove myself at the marketing firm. But it was my choice, my struggle, my investment in my own future. Meanwhile, the family group chat, which I'd somehow been added to despite never receiving family updates before, provided regular entertainment. Connor's high school baseball achievements received essay-length celebrations. Madison's high school art show was documented like the Met Gala. Dad's promotion, Mom's garden club presidency, even their dog's successful recovery from dental surgery received more fanfare than my college graduation. The contrast would have been laughable if it weren't so predictable. By winter, my hard work started paying off. I received my first promotion and a salary increase that allowed me to move to a one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. No roommates, no family obligations, no one expecting me to sacrifice my comfort for their convenience. I bought my first real piece of furniture, a comfortable reading chair, and cried sitting in it, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that I'd created a space where I could exist peacefully, where no one needed anything from me, where my presence was chosen, not mandated. The family calls became increasingly sporadic. When I did answer, the conversations felt like visiting a foreign country where I'd once lived, but no longer understood the customs. Mom would update me on Connor's recruitment possibilities and Madison's college prep activities like I was a distant aunt rather than their sister. Have you ever experienced that moment when you realize your family dynamic was never actually about love? When you understand that you've been playing a role in someone else's story rather than living your own life? Drop a comment below if you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family. Christmas that year, I stayed in New York. Not out of spite, but because I'd been invited to my mentor Janet's family gathering and wanted to experience a holiday where I wasn't expected to cook, clean, or manage other people's emotions. Janet's family asked me about my work, my goals, my interests. They listened to my answers. They saw me as a person worth knowing. When Mom called to guilt me about missing Christmas, I felt nothing. No sadness, no anger, no obligation. Just a mild curiosity about why she thought I'd want to spend my vacation serving people who'd never shown interest in my life. "We're your family, Giselle," she said, using the tone she'd perfected for making me feel selfish. "I know," I replied. "I'm just not sure you know what that means." The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know about how they viewed our relationship. I wasn't family. I was staff who'd quit without giving proper notice. 2 years into my New York life, I'd developed something I'd never had before: standards. Not just professional standards, though those had certainly elevated, but personal standards about how people could treat me and what I would accept in relationships. My career was flourishing in ways that surprised even me. The marketing campaigns I'd developed for luxury brands had caught industry attention. I was invited to conferences, quoted in trade publications, and headhunted by competing firms. Success, it turned out, was significantly easier when you weren't constantly distracted by family crisis management. The apartment in Brooklyn had given way to a one-bedroom in Manhattan, still modest by New York standards, but light years beyond anything I could have imagined growing up. I had furniture that matched, art on the walls, and a kitchen stocked with more than cereal and instant coffee. More importantly, I had friendships built on reciprocity. Sarah and I had maintained our college bond, but I'd also developed relationships with colleagues who shared my ambitions. We celebrated each other's promotions, commiserated over difficult clients, and supported each other through the inevitable challenges of building careers in a competitive city. Dating had been an adjustment. I'd had to learn to recognize red flags I'd been trained to ignore, to understand that healthy relationships involved mutual support rather than one-sided sacrifice. The first time a boyfriend thanked me for doing something nice for him instead of simply expecting it, I nearly cried. My therapist, yes, I'd finally prioritized my mental health, helped me understand that my family dynamic wasn't normal, that children shouldn't be responsible for managing adult emotions or raising their siblings, that love shouldn't be conditional on usefulness. "You were parentified," Dr. Morrison explained during one session. "You were forced into an adult role before you were developmentally ready, and now you're learning to reclaim your childhood autonomy." The therapy sessions were like learning a new language. Words like boundaries and self-advocacy had never been part of my vocabulary. The concept that I could say no without justifying my decision was revolutionary. Meanwhile, the family group chat continued its regular programming: Connor's college recruitment updates, Madison's senior year milestones, parents' social activities. I'd become a silent observer in their narrative, watching their lives unfold without feeling any obligation to participate. Occasionally, someone would remember I existed, usually when they needed something. "Giselle, could you look into colleges in New York for Madison? You know the area." "Giselle, do you know anyone in marketing who could help Connor with his personal brand for recruitment?" Always requests. Never questions about my life, my work, my happiness. I was still functioning as the family problem solver, just from a distance. My third promotion came with a significant salary increase and the opportunity to work on international campaigns. I was traveling regularly, staying in hotels that cost more per night than I used to spend on groceries in a month, dining with clients who valued my expertise. The irony wasn't lost on me. The daughter they'd considered least worthy of investment had become the most successful. While they'd poured resources into Connor's athletic dreams and Madison's artistic aspirations, I'd quietly built a career that surpassed anything they'd imagined possible. But here's the thing about success: when you've been systematically undervalued, it doesn't feel like vindication. It feels like proof that their assessment of your worth was never about your potential. It was about their need to maintain a hierarchy where someone else's dreams mattered more than yours. I stopped responding to the family group chat requests, not out of pettiness, but because I'd learned that my energy was valuable and should be invested in relationships that offered mutual respect. If they wanted my help, they could call and ask how I was doing first. They didn't call. The silence was initially uncomfortable, then liberating. I realized I'd been waiting my entire adult life for them to show interest in my achievements, to express pride in my independence, to acknowledge that the daughter they'd treated as disposable had actually been the most determined. That acknowledgement was never coming, and I was finally okay with that. By year 4 in New York, I'd stopped checking the family group chat entirely. My life had become too full of genuine relationships and meaningful work to waste emotional energy on people who'd never learned to see me as more than functional. My career trajectory had exceeded every goal I'd set. The marketing director position at Sterling & Associates came with a corner office, a team of talented creatives, and clients who sought my expertise specifically. Industry publications were featuring my campaigns, and I'd been invited to speak at conferences across the country. The financial security was something I'd never experienced growing up. I wasn't just surviving or even comfortable, I was thriving. My savings account had multiple zeros. My investment portfolio was growing. I could afford luxuries without calculating the opportunity cost. More importantly, I'd built a chosen family in New York. My friend group included Sarah, my colleague Marcus, and Janet, who'd become more of a mentor-turned-maternal figure than my actual mother had ever been. These were people who celebrated my successes, supported me through challenges, and valued my presence in their lives. Dating had led to a relationship with David, an architect who appreciated my independence and shared my ambition. He was the first person I'd dated who didn't expect me to manage his emotional needs or sacrifice my goals for his convenience. Our relationship felt like a partnership rather than another unpaid job. The contrast with my family's dynamic became even starker through this lens. David asked about my and listened to my answers. He encouraged my career advancement even when it meant travel or long hours. He celebrated my achievements as if they were his own victories. When I mentioned that my family rarely called anymore, David looked genuinely confused. Your sister's in college now, right? And your brother's graduating high school. You'd think they'd want your advice about their futures. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because his expectation that families would naturally seek each other's wisdom seemed so foreign to my experience. In David's family, siblings called each other for guidance. Parents asked for their adult children's perspectives. Success was shared and celebrated collectively. The realization hit me gradually. My family hadn't just failed to support my dreams. They'd never been curious about them. In 4 years of building a career in one of the most competitive cities in the world, they'd never asked about my work, my goals, or my day-to-day experience. They knew I lived in New York and worked in marketing. That was the extent of their knowledge about my adult life, and apparently, that was sufficient for them. Meanwhile, my chosen family in New York knew my professional aspirations, understood my childhood experiences, and supported my continued growth. They knew my favorite restaurants, my weekend routines, my travel preferences. They knew me as a complete person, rather than a function. The difference was startling when I allowed myself to acknowledge it. My therapist helped me process the grief that came with accepting reality. I was mourning the family relationships I'd never had and never would have. The parents who'd never expressed genuine pride in my achievements. The siblings who'd never shown interest in my life beyond what I could provide for theirs. You're allowed to feel sad about what you didn't receive, Dr. Morrison reminded me. Acknowledging the loss doesn't mean you're ungrateful for what you've built. Building that new life had required letting go of the hope that my family would eventually recognize my worth, that someday they'd realize they'd overlooked their most determined daughter, that eventually they'd want a real relationship rather than just occasional assistance. That someday was never coming, and accepting that truth was both heartbreaking and liberating. I was 26 years old and finally living for myself rather than waiting for other people's approval. The penthouse apartment viewing was supposed to be just another weekend activity. David and I had been casually looking at upgrade options, dreaming more than seriously planning. But when the realtor led us into the 34th floor corner unit with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, I felt something shift inside me. This is it, I whispered, watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold and amber. David squeezed my hand. Are you sure? It's a significant investment, I was sure. For the first time in my life, I was making a decision based purely on what I wanted, not what was practical or expected or responsible according to other people's standards. The apartment was beautiful, but more than that, it represented everything I'd built for myself. Independence, success, the freedom to choose my own priorities. The closing process took 3 months. During that time, I received exactly 0 calls from my family checking on my life changes. The group chat had been quiet for weeks, which I'd learned usually meant either nothing dramatic was happening or I wasn't included in whatever was happening. Moving day arrived with the kind of efficiency I'd learned to appreciate about New York. Professional movers, carefully packed belongings, and a clear timeline. David helped coordinate the logistics while I handled the final paperwork details. By evening, I was sitting in my new living room, surrounded by boxes but filled with satisfaction. The apartment was a reflection of everything I'd worked toward. Modern kitchen with appliances I'd researched extensively. A home office with space for my growing collection of industry awards. A bedroom large enough for actual furniture rather than just a bed crammed against one wall. But the real luxury was the space to breathe. No one needed anything from me. No one was monitoring my choices or commenting on my spending. No one was calculating whether my success could be leveraged for their benefit. I called Sarah to share the news, then David's parents, who'd become surrogate family figures and always expressed genuine interest in my achievements. I posted a subtle photo on Instagram, just the sunset view from my new living room window, with a caption about grateful for new beginnings. The responses were immediate and warm, friends congratulating me, colleagues expressing excitement about my success, former classmates reaching out to reconnect. It felt like sharing good news with people who actually cared about my happiness. 3 days later, my cousin Alex called. We'd maintained a distant but friendly relationship over the years. He was the only family member who'd ever visited me in New York, and one of the few who seemed to understand that I'd built something worth acknowledging. "I saw your Instagram post," he said. "That view is incredible. Mind if I come see the new place this weekend? I'm in town for work." Alex had always been different from the rest of my family. He asked questions about my life, remembered details from previous conversations, and treated me like a person whose experiences mattered. His visit was easy and comfortable. We ordered Thai food, watched movies, and caught up on each other's lives without drama or obligation. Before leaving Sunday morning, he asked if he could take a photo of us on the terrace. "My mom's always asking about you," he said. "She'll want to see that you're doing well." I agreed, thinking nothing of it. Alex was proud of his cousin who'd made it in the big city. It was sweet and harmless, or so I thought. He posted the photo that evening with a caption about visiting family in NYC and being impressed by my success. The photo showed us laughing on my terrace, the Manhattan skyline glittering behind us, the expensive furniture and city views clearly visible. The post received likes and comments from mutual family friends, distant relatives, and people from our hometown. Normal social media engagement from people who genuinely cared about our lives. But among those likes and comments were names I recognized from my childhood, my parents' friends, my siblings' social circles, people who would inevitably share this glimpse into my actual life with the family who'd never bothered to ask about it. Looking back, that photo was the match that lit the fuse. Not because Alex intended any harm, he was simply proud of my achievements and wanted to share that pride with people who knew us both. But that photo made my success visible to people who'd spent years assuming I was struggling somewhere in New York, probably waitressing and barely making rent. The image of me thriving, living luxuriously, and clearly prospering without their support or involvement challenged their narrative about my place in the family hierarchy. I didn't know it yet, but that single social media post was about to remind my family that I existed, and more importantly, that I was succeeding far beyond their expectations or contributions. The phone call came at 6:47 p.m. on a Tuesday while I was reviewing campaign proposals for a major client. The caller ID showed Mom, a contact I hadn't seen active in months. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won over caution. "Hi, Mom." My voice was neutral, professionally polite. "Giselle, sweetheart." Her tone was artificially bright, the kind of enthusiasm she'd never shown when calling to check on my well-being. "How are you, honey? It's been too long since we talked." Red flags immediately. In over 3 years of living in New York, she'd never called just to chat. There was always an agenda, usually involving a request for help with Connor or Madison. "I'm fine. How are things at home?" "Oh, you know, busy as always." "Connor's doing wonderfully at State. His batting average is really improving. And Madison's loving her senior year. She's applying to art schools now." I waited for her to ask about my life, my work, my relationship with David. The silence stretched uncomfortably. "Anyway," she continued, "I saw Alex's photo from his visit. Your apartment looks lovely, dear. Very upscale." There it was, the real reason for this sudden maternal interest in my well-being. "It's a nice place," I said carefully. "I've worked hard to afford it." "Of course you have. We're so proud of you, sweetie. You know, your father was just saying how impressed he is with everything you've accomplished." This was new. In my entire childhood, I couldn't recall a single instance of my father expressing pride in my achievements. But apparently, seeing evidence of my financial success had triggered some paternal recognition. "That's nice to hear," I replied, still waiting for the real conversation to begin. "Actually, honey, that's part of why I'm calling. We have a little situation here at home, and I thought maybe you could help us out." And there it was. The purpose revealed with surgical precision. "What kind of situation?" "Well, you know Madison's been looking at art schools and she got accepted to her dream program in California. It's very prestigious, very expensive. The thing is, we're a little short on the tuition money, and with Connor's college expenses too." I felt my chest tighten with familiar frustration. After years of silence, they were calling because they needed money. Not because they missed me, not because they wanted to celebrate my success, but because they'd seen evidence that I could afford to solve their problems. "How much are we talking about?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew this conversation was heading somewhere I wouldn't follow. $39,000, she said quickly, as if saying it faster would make it seem less significant. It's for Madison's first year. After that, she'll probably get more financial aid, and Connor will be finished with college soon, so things will be easier. $39,000, more than most people's annual salary, more than I'd saved in my first 2 years of working. An amount they were requesting as casually as asking to borrow a cup of sugar. That's a significant amount of money, Mom. I know it seems like a lot, but Giselle, this is Madison's dream. She's worked so hard for this opportunity, and you're doing so well now. Alex showed us the photos of your beautiful apartment. You're obviously very successful. What do you think will happen next? Have you ever had family members suddenly reappear when they discovered your success? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. The manipulation was breathtaking in its transparency. My success was evidence that I should subsidize my sister's education. My hard work was justification for their financial expectations. My independence was simply another resource for them to access when convenient. Mom, I appreciate that Madison has goals, but this isn't really my responsibility. Giselle, her tone shifted, becoming sharper, more familiar. This was the voice I remembered from childhood when I wasn't being sufficiently compliant. We're family. Family helps each other. When exactly has this family helped me? The question hung in the air like a challenge neither of us expected me to voice. The silence after my question lasted exactly long enough for me to realize I'd crossed a line my mother didn't expect me to cross. For 29 years, I'd been the daughter who didn't ask inconvenient questions, who didn't point out disparities in treatment, who accepted whatever role was assigned to me. That's not fair, Giselle, she finally said, her voice tight with controlled irritation. We've always supported you. How? The word came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't soften it. How exactly have you supported me? We raised you, we fed you, we put a roof over your head. Mom, those are basic parenting requirements, not special favors. I'm talking about actual support. When did you ever attend my school events? When did you celebrate my achievements? When did you invest in my education or career goals? Another pause. I could practically hear her recalculating, trying to find examples that didn't exist. You're being very ungrateful right now, she said, switching to guilt tactic. After everything we've done for you. The absurdity almost made me laugh. Everything they'd done for me consisted mainly of using me as free childcare and household management. You know what? Let me think about it, I said, buying myself time to end this conversation before it escalated further. The tuition money. Let me see what's possible. Oh, wonderful. I knew we could count on you. Madison will be so excited. I felt sick hearing the relief in her voice, the assumption that my consideration meant automatic agreement. I said I'd think about it, Mom. I didn't say yes. Of course, but Giselle, we do need to know soon. The payment deadline is next month. After hanging up, I sat in my living room staring at the Manhattan skyline and processing what had just happened. 3 years of zero contact except when they needed something. 3 years of building a life they'd shown no interest in understanding. And now, because a single photo had revealed my financial success, they were back with their hands out. I called David, who listened to the entire story with growing indignation. Let me understand this correctly, he said. They haven't called you in months, have no idea what you do for work, didn't attend your college graduation, and now they want nearly $40,000 because they saw your apartment? That's about the size of it. And this is the same family who never supported your education? The very same. David was quiet for a moment. You know you don't owe them anything, right? I did know that, intellectually. But emotionally, I was still the 7-year-old girl desperate for parental approval, still hoping that maybe this time, meeting their expectations would earn me the love I'd never received. The next few days brought a barrage of communication I hadn't experienced since leaving home. Madison called, gushing about her acceptance and mentioning how grateful she was that I was helping make her dreams come true. Connor sent a text saying he'd heard I was doing really well and maybe we could catch up soon. Even my father called, a man who'd spoken to me exactly twice since I'd moved to New York. Giselle, your mother told me about Madison's opportunity, he said in his measured, businesslike tone. It's generous of you to help out. I hadn't agreed to help. I'd said I would think about it. But in their minds, my consideration had already become commitment. Actually, Dad, I haven't decided anything yet. Well, of course you'll help. Madison's your sister. This is what family does. There was that word again. Family. Always invoked when they needed something, never present when I had needed them. I'm still considering my options, I said carefully. What options? Giselle, you have the money. Madison needs it. This isn't complicated. The entitlement was staggering. Not only did they expect me to fund my sister's education, but they couldn't understand why I might hesitate. In their worldview, my financial success existed for their benefit. I hung up feeling claustrophobic in my own apartment, surrounded by evidence of achievements they'd never celebrated, but now wanted to monetize. 3 days later, my mother called back. This time, the artificial sweetness was gone, replaced by barely concealed impatience. "Giselle, we need an answer about Madison's tuition. The deadline is approaching." I'd been dreading this conversation, but also preparing for it. 3 sleepless nights of processing had led me to a clarity I hadn't expected. "I've thought about it, and I can't help with the tuition." The silence was deafening. "What do you mean you can't help?" Her voice had shifted into a register I remembered from childhood, the tone that preceded consequences for disappointing her. "I mean, I'm not in a position to give you $39,000. Giselle, don't lie to me. Alex showed us your apartment. We know you're doing well." And there it was. The surveillance, the judgment, the assumption that they were entitled to audit my finances based on a single photograph. My living situation doesn't mean I have liquid assets available for other people's expenses. Other people? Madison is your sister? A sister who hasn't spoken to me in 3 years except to thank me for money I haven't given her. My mother's voice became sharper, more demanding. "You need to figure this out, Giselle. Madison's counting on you." "No, she's counting on you. You're her parents. Her education is your responsibility, not mine. How can you be so selfish? After everything we've done for you." I almost laughed at the repetition of this mythical narrative about everything they'd supposedly done for me. "Mom, specifically, what have you done for me that you didn't do for Connor and Madison? We raised you. You raised all of us. What did you do specifically for me?" Another silence, this one longer and more telling. "Fine," she said, her voice cold now. "If you can't help your own family, then you should sell your apartment and move somewhere more reasonable. Transfer the money to Madison and stop being so irresponsible with your life." I felt my breath catch. She wasn't just asking for money anymore. She was demanding that I downgrade my life to subsidize my sister's goals. "I'm not selling my apartment." "Then you're being selfish and ungrateful. It's time to show some responsibility and give back to the family that supported you." The conversation was surreal. In their minds, my success was somehow their achievement, and therefore, they were entitled to its benefits. My apartment, my career, my financial security, all of it was family property to be redistributed according to their priorities. "I'm not giving you the money," I said quietly but firmly. "Yes, you are," she said, her voice now completely cold. "You're going to figure out how to make this work because that's what family does. Madison needs this money and you have it. End of discussion." "It's not end of discussion. It's my money, my decision, and my answer is no." I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking with adrenaline. The phone rang immediately. I declined the call. It rang again, and again. Over the next hour, I received 17 phone calls from various family members. My mother, my father, Madison crying about her ruined dreams, Connor explaining how disappointed everyone was in my selfishness. I turned off my phone and sat in my living room, processing what had just happened. For the first time in my life, I'd said no to my family's demands. I'd established a boundary they couldn't cross, and instead of respecting that boundary, they'd declared war. 2 weeks of silence followed my refusal to fund Madison's education. No angry calls, no guilt trip texts, no emotional manipulation, just radio silence. I began to think they'd accepted my decision and moved on to other solutions. I should have known better. I was working from home on a Thursday morning when my doorman called to announce I had a visitor. My mother was in the lobby, asking to come up. No warning, no phone call, no request for permission, just sudden appearance with the expectation of immediate access. My first instinct was to tell the doorman I wasn't available, but curiosity won over self-preservation. I wanted to see what desperation looked like on someone who'd never experienced it before. She appeared at my apartment door looking like she'd traveled all night, rumpled clothing, tired eyes, but with the same determined expression I remembered from my childhood when she'd made decisions that weren't up for discussion. "Mom," I said, not moving aside to let her in, "this is unexpected. We need to talk." She pushed past me into the apartment, uninvited. The apartment looked exactly like what it was, the home of a successful professional who'd worked hard for everything she owned. She walked around my living room like she was conducting an appraisal, examining furniture, artwork, and finishes with calculating eyes. "This must have cost you quite a bit," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. "I've done well for myself." "Yes, you have. And now it's time to do well for your family." I remained standing by the door, making it clear this visit wouldn't be lengthy or comfortable. I thought I was clear about my position on Madison's tuition. She turned to face me, her expression hardening into something I'd never seen before, pure entitlement mixed with desperation. Your position is unacceptable. Madison's dreams are being destroyed because of your selfishness. Madison's dreams are not my responsibility. Yes, they are. Her voice rose to a near shout. You have money. She needs money. Your family. It's that simple. It's not that simple. And it's not my obligation. She walked closer, invading my space in a way that felt deliberately intimidating. Let me explain something to you, Giselle. Family takes care of family. We raised you, we supported you, and now you owe us. I don't owe you anything. Yes, you do. And if you don't give us that money willingly, I'll find other ways to get it. The threat was unmistakable, though vague enough to maintain plausible deniability. What does that mean? It means I'll explore every legal option available to ensure Madison gets what she deserves, including filing suit against you for financial elder abuse of your father. I stared at her, genuinely shocked by the audacity. Financial elder abuse? Dad's not even retirement age. He will be soon. And if we need to demonstrate that you've been exploiting our family connection for personal gain while refusing to help when we need it, she let the threat hang in the air, confident it would pressure me into compliance. Instead, I felt something snap inside me. Not anger, but crystal clear resolve. Go ahead, I said quietly. Sue me. Her confident expression faltered slightly. What? I said go ahead and sue me. File whatever papers you want. Hire whatever lawyers you think you can afford. Drag me into court and explain to a judge why I'm legally obligated to pay for my sister's college education. She stepped closer, her face flushed with frustration. You think you're so smart, don't you? Living in your fancy apartment, acting like you're better than the family that raised you. I don't think I'm better than anyone. I think I'm done being treated like an ATM that's supposed to be grateful for the privilege. That's when she slapped me. The sound echoed in my apartment like a gunshot. My cheek stung, but more than that, I felt a strange sense of relief. Because in that moment, she'd revealed exactly who she was and what our relationship had always been about. I looked at her calmly, my hand on my cheek. Get out. Giselle, get out of my apartment right now. She gathered her purse and headed toward the door, but turned back for one final attempt at manipulation. You're destroying this family. No, I said, opening the door. I'm protecting myself from it. My father called that evening, his voice carefully controlled in the way I remembered from childhood when he was trying to manage family crisis without taking sides. Your mother told me about your conversation today. I was sitting on my terrace, watching the city lights twinkle below, still processing the surreal experience of being physically struck by someone who was supposed to love me unconditionally. Did she mention the part where she slapped me, or just the part where I refused to bankroll Madison's education? A pause. She mentioned that emotions ran high. Emotions ran high. As if my mother's violence was just an unfortunate side effect of passionate family dynamics, rather than an assault that would have resulted in criminal charges if we weren't related. Dad, she came to my home uninvited, threatened to sue me for elder abuse, and then hit me when I didn't comply with her demands. Those aren't emotions running high. That's abusive behavior. Now, Giselle, let's not be dramatic. Your mother is under a lot of stress with Madison's situation. The dismissal was immediate and predictable. My experience didn't matter when weighed against someone else's stress. My boundaries were less important than their comfort. My safety was secondary to their convenience. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being accurate. Look, sweetheart, I understand you're upset. But maybe we can find a compromise here. You don't have to pay the full amount. Even $20,000 would help significantly. And there it was. The negotiation phase. Having failed with demands and threats, they were moving to bargaining, as if my refusal was just an opening position in a financial discussion. I'm not paying any amount. Giselle, be reasonable. Madison's your baby sister. You used to take care of her when she was little. The manipulation was so transparent, it was almost insulting. Yes, I'd taken care of Madison when she was little, because I'd been forced to assume parental responsibilities as a child myself. That coerced caregiving didn't create lifelong financial obligations. I took care of both kids because you and Mom made me. That doesn't mean I'm responsible for funding their adult goals. This family has always supported each other. No, Dad. This family has always used me to support everyone else. There's a difference. His voice became more urgent, less controlled. Your mother is talking about lawyers, Giselle. She's serious about this lawsuit threat. It would be easier for everyone if we could just work something out. I felt a cold laugh escape. Are you seriously calling to warn me about legal action while simultaneously trying to pressure me into paying money to avoid it? That sounds like extortion. That's not... I'm trying to help you understand the situation. I understand the situation perfectly. You want $39,000 from me, and you're willing to threaten legal action, family estrangement, and emotional manipulation to get it. What I don't understand is why you think any of that would make me want to maintain a relationship with people who treat me this way. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. "Giselle," he finally said, his voice softer. "You're our daughter. We love you." "No, you don't." The words came out with quiet certainty. "You love what I can provide. You love having someone to solve your problems and fund your priorities. But you don't love me." "That's not true. When's the last time you called just to see how I was doing? When's the last time you asked about my work, my relationship, my happiness? When's the last time you celebrated my achievements without immediately calculating how they could benefit someone else?" Another long pause. "You're successful. Independent. We figured you didn't need us checking in. I needed you to care enough to try. We do care. That's why we're asking for your help with Madison. You care about my bank account. You care about my utility. You don't care about me as a person." I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, probably formulating another approach, another angle of persuasion. "I'm going to make this simple for you, Dad. I'm not giving you money for Madison's tuition. I'm not negotiating about it. And if you or Mom contact me again to discuss this, I'll consider it harassment and act accordingly. Giselle, we're done with this conversation." I hung up and immediately blocked both my parents' numbers. Then I sat on my terrace until midnight, feeling something that might have been grief but was probably relief. The final text messages came from my siblings over the next few days. Madison's was an essay-length guilt trip about her ruined dreams and my heartless selfishness. Connor's was shorter but more direct, calling me a disgrace to the family name and accusing me of abandoning the people who'd sacrificed for me. The sacrifice narrative was particularly interesting coming from Connor, whose entire childhood had been subsidized by my unpaid labor and emotional management. But I suppose from his perspective, having a sister who handled family responsibilities so he didn't have to probably did feel like sacrifice, someone else's sacrifice for his benefit. I took screenshots of everything before blocking their numbers, too. Not for legal purposes, but for clarity. Whenever I doubted my decision or felt tempted to reconnect, I wanted tangible proof of how they viewed our relationship. Dr. Morrison helped me process the finality of it all during our session that week. "How does it feel, knowing you've closed that door?" "Peaceful," I said, surprising myself with the honesty. I spent so many years waiting for them to see me as worthy of their love. Now I realize I was waiting for something that was never available. "And you're okay with that?" I thought about it carefully. I'm sad about what I never had, but I'm not sad about protecting myself from more of the same. They showed me exactly who they are when I needed them to be different. The weeks that followed brought a strange sense of liberation. No more checking my phone with anxiety about family crisis calls. No more calculating whether I could afford to help with someone else's emergency. No more walking on eggshells to avoid triggering their disappointment or disapproval. David noticed the change immediately. "You seem lighter," he said one evening as we cooked dinner together. "I feel lighter, like I've been carrying a weight I didn't realize was there." My chosen family rallied around me in ways my biological family never had. Sarah flew in from Boston for a weekend of moral support. Janet took me to lunch and shared her own stories of family dysfunction and eventual independence. Marcus organized a dinner with our colleague friends who'd become my urban tribe. These people celebrated my boundary setting as strength rather than condemning it as betrayal. They understood that protecting yourself from toxic relationships was an act of self-respect, not selfishness. 3 months later, I received a wedding invitation from a college acquaintance. As I RSVP'd, I realized this would be the first wedding I'd attend without calculating whether my family would approve of my +1, my outfit choice, or my gift amount. I could simply enjoy celebrating someone else's happiness without performing for an audience that was never going to be satisfied anyway. The freedom was intoxicating. 6 months after the final confrontation, David and I got engaged. The proposal was everything I'd never known I wanted. Thoughtful, personal, focused on our future together rather than anyone else's expectations. As I looked at the ring on my finger, I felt grateful for the first time that my family wasn't part of this moment. They would have found ways to make it about them, to center their feelings and preferences in what should have been exclusively about David and me. Planning our wedding became an exercise in joy rather than stress. No family drama about the guest list because my list was simple. People who'd supported our relationship and celebrated our love. No arguments about traditions because we could create our own. No negotiations about budget because we could afford exactly what we wanted without anyone else's input or approval. A year later, when our daughter Emma was born, I held her in my arms and made promises I'd never heard as a child. That her worth would never be conditional on her usefulness. That her achievements would be celebrated for her sake, not evaluated for our benefit. That she would be loved as a complete person, not just for what she could provide. Most importantly, I promised her that she would never be responsible for managing adult emotions or solving problems that weren't hers to solve. If this story resonated with you, Make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in difficult family situations. Sometimes protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. Emma will grow up in a home where love is unconditional, where boundaries are respected, and where children are allowed to be children. She'll never wonder if she's worthy of celebration or support because those things will be freely given without expectation of return. And if she ever asks why she doesn't have grandparents on my side, I'll tell her the truth, that some people are related by blood but aren't actually family, and that real family are the people who choose to love and support each other consistently, not just when it's convenient. My real family is David, Emma, and the chosen tribe who saw my worth when I couldn't see it myself. The family who taught me that love doesn't come with price tags or conditions or threats. I'm Giselle, I'm 29, and I finally learned the difference between being used and being loved. The difference, it turns out, is everything.